So in the previous video, we're looking at the locus of the isogonal conjugate of a fixed point P over a family of Poncelet triangles interscribed between two ellipses, nested ellipses in general position. And what we were talking about was the fact that that locus over Poncelet was a conic. Okay? Now if I move P around, so let's go ahead and move P around. That conic changes, right? So it's an ellipse. Now you're going to see here that at some point this conic changes over to, say, a hyperbola. Okay, so here's a hyperbola. If we scale this out, we can see this hyperbola. Okay, and there are places where you can actually place P where the conic is a parabola. Okay, so as a first observation in this video, I actually want to draw the frontier between these conic types, which I actually did recently. So I'm calling this the frontiers. And let's try to actually go over them. So you can see here, let's consider first of all this red oval, which is a place where P is in the interior of this first red oval. Okay, now let's bring P closer to the interior, and you can see here that the locus over Poncelet, let's go ahead and animate Poncelet, of the isogonal of P is an ellipse. Right, so I'm showing here the axis of the ellipse, the center of the ellipse, and whatnot. Okay, now what this red oval actually represents is actually the transition between the locus being an ellipse and it being a hyperbola. So if I, for example, bring P over to that red oval, if P is exactly on that oval anywhere, my locus is actually going to be numerically a parabola. Okay, so you can see here this is becoming a pretty elongated ellipse, and in fact, if I just nudge the x coordinate to the right, this thing kind of degenerates and it turns into a parabola. And then as soon as P leaves this region and it goes over to the right side, it becomes a hyperbola. Okay, so now if I actually slide P down a bit, I'm between this red oval over here, okay, and this other big red oval over here, or this red region here, and I'm gonna talk about the green one in a second. Okay, but it turns out that if I'm in the interior of this first oval, I'm an ellipse, or the locus of the isogonal is an ellipse. If I'm between the two red curves here, the locus of the isogonal is a hyperbola. We're gonna visit the green one in a second, but let's go ahead and move over to, you can see here that it continues to be a hyperbola. And then finally, if P is outside of this outer red region, I become an ellipse again. Okay, so if I move the y coordinate of P to the top, you can see that I'm still an ellipse. So the question now is, okay, let's re-enter that red zone. Okay, and the question now is, what is the green locus representing? It's actually a pretty interesting phenomenon. It turns out I'm in the hyperbola region, right, between these two red curves. If P is on this green curve, let's go ahead and place P over there. My hyperbola, you can see here that the axis ratio of the hyperbola is tending to 1. So if I'm exactly on the green curve, I am a rectangular hyperbola. And the really neat observation is that the locus of P, such that the locus of the isogonal is a rectangular hyperbola, is a circle. So this green curve here is numerically a circle. Okay, so I do not have an expression for it right now, but I can sort of manually place P on it. So let's actually place P, for example, at another position here, this one over here. And let's check by looking at this number here, it's actually tending to 1.00. Indeed it is. Indeed it is. So here's at 1.00, and if I scale out, we can see that we're talking about a hyperbola which has asymptotes that are at right angles. Therefore, it's a rectangular hyperbola. Okay, so this is observation number 1. Observation number 2. Okay, so let's go ahead and take out these regions from the screen, and let's bring P back to sort of a more central location. So we're back here to an ellipse. Now, one of the things that we talked about in the last video was the following. If P were on the inner ellipse, and I jogged jogged P over that inner ellipse, all the loci of the isogonal conjugate of P over Poncelet, right? I'm always talking about loci over Poncelet. So actually, you know, what's the subtext here is that I'm always doing a complete revolution of Poncelet triangles, and I'm actually sweeping a conic. Okay, now, provided P is on the inner conic, on the caustic of this Poncelet family, that locus has a nice property that it's going to be actually tangent to the outer conic. Now, I've done some numerical tests, and in fact, I can easily show you guys what the locus of the center point is as we sweep P. Okay, so let's go ahead and find that on my other notebook. I have that here, right here. So I'm actually showing, you can see here that there's individual ellipses that represent each one of the isogonal loci for a particular position of P. But what I'm interested in is actually getting a visualization of what the center of those ellipses are doing. And they're actually going around in this bean-shaped or kidney-shaped curve here, so it's a non-conic, and this curve could be studied, but I'm just going to leave it at that level of detail for now. We're not finding anything particularly low degree or harmonious here. Okay, all right, so actually what I do want to show is, let's now place P on the outer conic right here, and recall from a previous video as well that we were actually saying that when P is on the outer conic, over Poncelet, the locus of the isogonal image of P was a straight line. Okay, so obviously if I move P along the boundary of that outer conic, I'm going to be sweeping a family of straight lines. So one of the questions that I raised in the previous video was, what could the envelope of these loci be? Since they are straight lines, I can talk about an envelope. So I actually numerically figured it out, and I'm going to light it up over here. And it's quite a surprising result. This envelope is an ellipse which is confocal with a caustic. So I'm actually doing a numerical, well, first of all, I'm doing a visualization what this envelope is. So let's go ahead and move P around. You can see that I have a line that is sweeping an envelope. A little bit of numerical instability here because whenever P comes close to the circumcircle of my blue triangle, I can no longer compute the isogonal. So there's going to be some jumping around here and some instability. But if you ignore those instabilities, those sort of there's a discrete set of points where P is exactly on the circumcircle of the blue, and let's go ahead and delete those. There is a smooth enveloping of a curve here, and then when I plug this into my least squares conic detector, it actually told me, yes, this is a conic, this is an ellipse, and here are the foci. So I just lit up the foci, and they fell right on top of the foci of my caustic. So it looks like there's a cool harmony here, in that not only is the locus of the isogonal over Poncelet, you can see the isogonal right here with respect to this point P is over here. It's moving over Poncelet along a straight line, but over all P on the outer conic, these loci will envelop an ellipse confocal with the caustic of my original Poncelet family. Where does this confocality come from? I have no idea. You know, where does the fact that I'm getting, for all P here, I'm getting a locus of P, which is a circle, if I'm supposed to get a rectangular hyperbola. Why is it that rectangular hyperbolas are giving rise to the circle is also a pretty interesting fact. So there are these two new facts, the sort of green locus, the circular locus of the rectangular hyperbola, and the confocal envelope of the straight line loci of P, of the isogonal of P, if P is sliding on the outer boundary, as such. So I'm sliding P on the outer boundary, and I'm sweeping a conic which is confocal with the caustic. Hope you've enjoyed it. See you on the next video.